Welcome back to Age Better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome back someone who's become a great friend of the show, Joan Price. Joan's not just any expert on sexuality after 50. She's the person who has helped countless men and women rediscover joy and pleasure in their lives, especially during some of their toughest moments. Joan's been a guest on Age Better before. You might remember Joan from her really fantastic episode about sex toys for women over 50. In fact, it was the most downloaded episode of 2024, and on YouTube, there have been close to 800,000 views and counting. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into something that is hard for a lot of people to even contemplate: how to reconnect with your sexual self after losing someone you love. Joan's bringing her wisdom from her newly updated book, which is called Sex After Grief. And trust me, her compassionate approach to this very sensitive topic is exactly what so many people need to hear. This is actually part one of a special two-parter we've planned. Next week, Joan's coming back with a fresh take on the best sex toys of 2024, specially chosen for those navigating the changes of menopause, which is probably just about all of us. And speaking of which, if you haven't caught last week's episode with Dr. Margaret Nachtigal about dealing with vaginal dryness, a hugely common complaint, if you will, of women in midlife, do yourself a favor and give it a listen or watch on my YouTube channel. The solutions she shared, they are game-changing. And you know what's really driving every conversation I'm having this year? It's all about putting yourself first. I know, as women, we're basically programmed to take care of everyone else first. But here's the thing, everyone, your pleasure, your joy, your sexual wellness, they matter too. And Joan Price is here to remind us exactly why. Also, just a quick reminder, please send me your ideas for topics you want to hear on the show by emailing me at agebetterpodcast@gmail.com. or reach out to me on social media. All right, everyone, let's get this conversation started. Hey, Joan, welcome back to Age Better.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm so happy to be back with you.
And today we're going to talk about your award-winning book that you've expanded for 2024. Yes. We're going to talk about that, Sex After Grief. A really, really important topic, especially, I think, for this age group. But first, I want to wish you a Happy New Year, Joan.
And the same to you and to all of your followers.
Do you do resolutions? I mean, is that a thing for you?
Actually, I do resolutions every week.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, good.
I do them in this way. What do I want to accomplish? What will bring me joy? And what will support my health?
Oh, I love that.
I do those 3 resolutions, and I do them sometimes weekly, sometimes daily. But I found that by framing them that way, that I'm really hitting the bases that are important to me at age 81.
Yeah. That's so true. And for me, too. I just turned 68. I celebrated a birthday a few weeks ago, and I'm like, reassessing. And I did talk about that in the little episode I did about turning 68 and kind of my year-end review of some of the podcast guests I've had on the show. And I like to talk about reassessing. So in a way, what you were just saying, it's kind of like a reassessing. You're like,
that's right.
Okay, let me reassess. Am I hitting all 3 of those that you just mentioned, Joan?
Exactly.
Am I achieving those 3? And if not, what can I do?
That's right. And sometimes we get so involved in minutia or the things other people want from us that we forget to prioritize ourselves. And we have to. Certainly at my age, 81, and I'm happy to keep saying that because I'm proud.
As
I'm
you
so
should.
proud I got here.
As you should. I know. And listen, I just want to stop you. Thank you so much for pointing out this kind of taking care of ourselves more, putting ourselves first. That is the theme of Age Better podcast this year for 2025. I've made a theme. So every single episode that I record this whole year is going to tie back to that idea of putting yourself first. Now, I'm not saying 100% of the time because, hey, life, you've got maybe aging parents, a partner, children, who knows what's going on in your life and who you have in it, but that you have to pay attention to and you want to. But really, hey, give yourself some grace and make yourself a priority. And that is also true of, as you often say, Joan, I mean, you are the expert here on this, especially your sex life.
That's right.
If not especially, certainly including having a good sex life. So thank you for bringing that up. I just want to keep pointing that out to everyone throughout this year.
Yeah.
Please, everyone, take care of yourselves. As Joan just said, find ways to bring more joy into your life, more health into your life, and more happiness, and surround yourself with people who really support those goals for yourself.
And it isn't selfish. I want to point that out because we're saying put ourselves first. Well, if you don't put on your own oxygen mask, you can't help anyone else with theirs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Recently I told the story, I had another guest on telling about how Diane von Furstenberg had the great honor of interviewing her from my first book. And she said exactly that. Like, she loves her grandchildren, her children, her husband, blah, 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 loves them all so much, but she loves herself more. And she even used that word. She goes, it sounds selfish, right, Barbara? But it isn't. It's smart. It's smart. So,
yeah.
Let that be our kind of, Joan, you and I and everyone listening in, our overall resolution, kind of always have that as your resolution. And then I love your idea, Joan, to have those 3 thoughts that you revisit maybe every day, certainly once a week, to make sure you're on track, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, yay. I'm so glad I asked you about that. Okay.
Well, what a good start to the show.
It's a great start to the show. Yay. Okay. So let's talk about your book, which was, award-winning. You expanded it for 2024, which we're also happy about. And of course, there is a backstory. We all want to hear why you expanded it for 2024. But first, please tell us, what made you write that book to begin with?
My own grief journey made me write it to begin with. Mm-hmm. All of my books about older age sexuality and all of the work I do really comes out of my love affair with the great love of my life, Robert Rice. His last name differed from mine by 1 letter, whom I met when I was 57 and he was 64. And I lost him 7 years later to the day. First kiss and last kiss were the same date. I lost him to cancer. And my grief journey took many, many false starts and correct starts and restarts and starting over and over again in trying to open myself to my own sexuality. Even solo, it was hard to start again. Yeah. And then when I felt I was ready to, what would it look like if I brought someone else in? I really miss touch, not just orgasms. I can give myself orgasms, but I'm missing touch and holding and a voice in my ear, quiet voice in my ear. And the being able to open to pleasure that someone else is assisting me with and being able to give that back. And what would that look like? And so over my long grief journey, many years of it in trying new things and figuring out what was right for me and realizing that it wasn't going to be what it was before, it was going to be something different. And maybe at first it was going to be something temporary, a friends with benefits. And I'm taking far too long to answer your question. So I wrote the book not only with my own grief journey, but also inviting other grievers, because one thing that was very clear to me is we all grieve differently.
Yeah.
And we all come back to love and sex, or love or sex, differently in our own timeline, in our own way, our own, maybe the kind of relationship we want is very, very different. So I invited other grievers to submit their stories. And I put all this together with some advice from experts into sex after grief, navigating your sexuality after losing your beloved. Yeah. And as you said, thank you so much. It won some great awards. Then, as we got to the 5-year mark after this book had been out, it came out in 2019, started thinking, I wonder, those grievers who sent me their stories, where are they now? If they had just met someone, they were excited again. Did that relationship last? And I thought, well, maybe either it lasted or it was the way they came back to sex, but then the relationship itself would fade away and they'd go on to something else. I wanted to know this. I also had things that I wanted to talk about that hadn't been in the first book. And so the new edition, which has the 2019 book plus 4 new chapters, many more griever stories, came to be.
And so what new insights did you gain from doing this, adding on these chapters and these new stories to the expanded version that came out in 2024? And were there any stories that you revisited that were really surprising or like happy or sad or anything you want to share?
Yes, all of that.
All of that.
Well, for one thing, what had ended up working for me eventually, I am in a new, okay, it's 7.5 years old already, relationship that had just really gotten started when I wrote the other book. And it is one thing that was important to me is I didn't want to live with this new person again, or I didn't want to live with this person. I wanted to be able to keep my own home, have him keep his own home, and we would be together, not automatically by default, but when we planned it, to keep it fresh.
Yes.
Not assumptions, of course, we're going to make dates still after 7.5 years. And I discovered that so many of the other grievers had come to that same conclusion.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
And there's a thing called LAT, living apart together, which I didn't know how to name when I wrote the first edition of the book. And it does. It has even books written about it, which is when people are in a committed relationship, but they choose to live separately and visit often. Which personally I think is a great way to do it.
It's a great way to do it.
And whenever I talk to audiences about it, people go, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. I want that. So that was one thing. And one other thing that I learned is that sometimes people have a new relationship and things go terribly wrong. And so I have a new chapter, when life throws you curveballs. When maybe the person that you fell in love with after your partner died, that person gets sick and dies.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you going through it twice.
Yeah.
And what you do with your heart and your brain when you're recovering from the same thing again.
Yeah. Oh.
So there were some really poignant stories. There were some really happy stories. People, oh yeah, we're still together. We got married. We love each other very much.
Yeah.
There's also the idea that you can love 2 people. You can love the person you lost. You can love the person you're with.
Yes, absolutely.
You don't have to say, okay, that's closed because there's this new person I'm falling in love with. No, you can love both. So I have a chapter called 2 Loves.
That makes sense. I want to ask a question. And this is a question to you personally, Joan, as well as regarding the other people that you spoke with, those who are choosing to live apart, right? Together but apart.
Yes.
Do you think that that is a way to honor the person they lost? Like, still have that relationship, have that sexual relationship with a new person, but then still maintain that spatial separation to honor the person they lost. Is that possible? Was that true of you?
Oh, yes. It's still true of me.
Yeah.
My home is still full of Robert's paintings. He was an artist. I teach line dancing, and I have a dance room where I practice dances, great big mirror on one wall. And I have, I'm going to look at it now. Oh, I have something he wrote to me. He did a little heart, and he wrote in pencil, "Dancing with You." That is on my dance room wall mirror. And every time I practice a dance, I touch it first.
Oh, that's so sweet. I give also your current love a lot of credit. I mean, it takes a very big person with a lot of self-confidence, I think, to allow that to continue, to have you continue to have that relationship with your former love. So I really applaud him, and as well as anyone out there listening who has a similar situation, who understands the need for the other person to have that.
It does take a special person. He is a special person. He also is a widower, and his home is also full of memorabilia of his wife. And I honor that, and I want to hear the stories. And he invited me to bring some of Robert's paintings into his home.
Oh, that's lovely.
And he gave me his wife's jewelry.
That's so lovely.
So it feels like...
It feels right, doesn't it?
It feels right. He is the person he is because he loved so deeply for 35 years.
Yeah.
I am the person I am because I loved so deeply for only 7.
But deeply.
But so deeply.
Yes. And the other question I have too was, if someone has a new relationship and, as you pointed out, it doesn't go well, in fact, it goes very badly, do you think maybe, is it a phenomenon that people look for the same person again? And that's not really possible. I wonder if they're just looking to repeat as opposed to have a whole new experience. And I wonder if that's what's at play as well. But I suppose it's each situation's. Is that right? Okay.
I found that what people were looking for, they were guarding their memories of the person they lost. They didn't want to replace the person. They knew it couldn't happen. They didn't want to do it. So they were looking for someone who was not that person, a relationship that was not that relationship. I know of the people I heard from, the many dozens I heard from for this book and for the first book, I did not hear, "I want to replace the same kind of love I had." I heard instead, "Maybe what I need now is this." There's also a concept called the pilot light lover that I introduced in the 2019 edition, which is not my invention. It's from Gail Sheehy in her book Passages. No, Sex and the Seasoned Woman. I think it was in that one.
Okay.
The idea that when you're coming back to wanting sex again, whether it's after, in her case, it was whether it's after a breakup or a death, in my case, after a death, that you're looking for someone who will light your fire again, who will get you back in touch with your capacity for feeling sexual pleasure. So it isn't that you're wanting a new permanent relationship. You're wanting to feel that fire again, and you need someone to light your pilot light.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the pilot light lover usually does not last. They have a function. They fulfill the function.
Yep.
They may not even be good long-term material.
Right.
They might just be someone, wow, I'm feeling attraction for this person. You may be all wrong for me, but let's go for it. Let's go for it this time.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing, you also mentioned something was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. This book and everything we're talking about, I mean, we are talking about sex after grief, sex after loss, right? And we're talking about, in your case, someone who passed away. But really what you're talking about here is just losing that relationship, which could even be from a separation, as you said, a divorce, or something like that, as not just death, correct?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Almost everything in the book applies if it's been a breakup.
Okay.
However, when this book was just a glimmer in my eye in about 2017, 2018, there were no books about this. There were no books about coming back to your sexuality after the death of your beloved. Okay. There were plenty of books about divorce. I remember one from, decades ago, He's History, You're Not, by Erica Manfred. I just love that title so much.
Oh my gosh.
And that was not just
I remember that.
That was not just about sex. That was about all sorts of
everything.
things.
Yes.
Financing, finances, living alone, all sorts of things. But there were lots of books about divorce. Many of them were quite adamant about, he's gone and you're going to be fine.
Yes. This is
there
very
weren't
different.
Any books about losing your beloved and still regaining your sexuality.
Very, very different. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I would say people who have gone through a breakup, yes, read this book. But people who have lost their beloved, this is the one.
This is the one for you. Okay, so now let's talk about how people feel about when they're ready, Joan, right? When they're ready, like you know this from experience, there was a point when you felt, okay, I'm ready to tiptoe back in and explore and see what this can be for me. So what advice do you give to people listening in now who are just don't know how to do that, or who feel guilty even about even thinking about going and having sex again or any kind of a relationship again?
It's really two questions, and they're both so important. So remind me about the guilty in a moment.
Okay.
How do you know you're ready? You don't.
How do you know you're ready? Yeah, you don't.
You don't. My advice is you tiptoe in. You try things. You experiment with it. You explore what you're ready for. So often we think, okay, sex is all or nothing. Either you're ready or you're not. No, it isn't. You may be ready for just kissing and holding.
Yeah.
You may be ready to, I'm sure you remember first base, second base, third base, home run. You may be ready for just one of the bases, but not the home run.
Not the home run.
You may be ready to just receive pleasure, and you may not want to reciprocate yet. Of course, this has to be by mutual agreement of whoever is the pleasure giver. But this is something that is very common.
Yeah.
So you tiptoe in, you try things, realize that if you try something and it doesn't work, you haven't failed. You've just discovered something new about yourself, that you're partially ready. So the next time it'll be a little different. Maybe what you learned was you don't want someone who is, maybe what you learned, let me do it in a different way, is that you want to be with someone who's gone through what you've gone through.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to only date other widowed people for a while. That may not be your permanent solution because it really does narrow the field, but it may be what you want at first. I know I thought that was what I wanted at first, and I only dated widowers. And I found sometimes, the only thing we have in common is we're widowed. Well, that ain't going to work very well.
Yeah.
Either, for many reasons, I don't want to stay on that. It turns out I dated some non-widowers, and then I came back, and the person I'm with now is a widower. And that's such an important part of what we're able to understand about each other and give to each other and receive from each other.
Mm-hmm. So about the guilt. You asked me to bring you back to guilt.
This is a huge, huge thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, huge. Because, yes, there is the feeling often, I am betraying the spouse that I promised to be faithful to for life by even thinking about wanting to be with someone else. And I have a lot to say about that. So stop me if I go too far, but
please do, because I think this is really important. I think that this is probably huge. A very normal reaction to yourself when you're thinking about forging ahead again. So please help us.
First of all, if we received the gift of our spouse telling us to find joy again, then we are among the few lucky ones, because most people don't discuss it. Even when one is dying, they don't want to talk about it. If you are lucky enough to have your beloved in your life alive right now, talk about it. Please bring it up and say, if in the future I am no longer able to be with you, maybe I'm not alive, maybe I'm not capable of a relationship anymore because of illness, because of dementia, whatever it might be, I want to tell you now, I honor our love so much that I want you to go forth and find love again, to be sexual with someone again, to find joy again. I give you my blessing. Whatever wording works for you, give your beloved that greatest gift and get that from your beloved, because most people don't get that. And then they're feeling horribly guilty. They're feeling they're betraying their beloved. They really feel stuck in what was never said, and we don't have to do it that way. I was lucky enough that my Robert said, you have so much love still to give. You have so much joy in you. My partner's wife said, don't be a hermit.
Wow.
And that was so freeing. That was, of course, we're still going to be in grief. Of course, we're still going to feel guilty on some level with how can I be ready to go on to someone else? How can I do this? But if we know we're doing it with our beloved's blessing,
yes,
then we can feel that push. I can feel Robert saying, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. He's a good one.
Yeah.
And my partner could feel his wife saying, she's a keeper.
Indeed, you are.
I'm going to cry just thinking about that.
No, this is wonderful. And you say in your book that this is probably the most important conversation that a couple can have.
Yes.
At some point, because we don't know what the future holds.
We don't.
We do not.
We don't.
And it's important to have that kind of, everyone says, have the important conversations about the health proxies and, financial situations, but no one ever thinks about having this conversation.
We talk about everything else.
It's giving a blessing to your future.
Yes. And it's giving your beloved happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really want to say, no, don't ever have anyone after me. I want you to be miserable for the rest of your life because mine has ended. Is that what we want to give someone we loved? Is that really what we want to leave them with?
No, but I'm sure there are some people, and I'm sure we've all encountered them. There are some people out there who are like, no, I do not want my husband like having another relationship as like this one in the future. I don't know. Hopefully
there were
that's
a couple
not the
of
case.
grievers who said that, who wrote me those stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a horrible thing to do.
Yeah, it is.
And for people who didn't have the conversation, imagine the conversation. You know your person. What would your person tell you right now? And often they will think through that the voice of their beloved would say, of course, I don't want you to be lonely for the rest of your life.
Right. I mean, that's true love.
Yeah.
That's part of the love experience. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. It was definitely something I wanted to explore with you. And so what is the first step? I mean, we did talk about kind of feeling when you're ready, you're never really ready. You never really know when you're ready. But if someone wants to explore, is there a first step?
I think the first step is to figure out what kind of relationship would work for you at this time of your life. I'm not saying for the rest of your life, just right now, what would work for you? Would a friends with benefits work for you? That's what ended up working for me for quite a long time.
Yes.
And that was so helpful to me. But that's not for everyone. Would hiring someone to give you pleasure work for you? That can be done.
Right.
Would having just someone to date for a while without it being sexual, just to where you get used to interacting with new people, maybe that would work for you for a while. If you just realize this isn't what you're saying you want for the rest of your life, this is what you want right now, what would work for you? Because so often we're stuck in, well, I had this committed relationship for 20, 30, 40 years. Obviously, going forward, that's what I want again. Is it? For right now, though. And there were people who wrote to me who said, I just want to be a wild child for a while. I never had that. I married young.
Yeah, and that's okay too. I never had that. Right.
I never had that. I'm going to do that now. And there was someone in the first edition of the book I know who said, who went to a wedding and said, I'm going to have sex this weekend. Went to this destination wedding. I'm going to find someone to have sex with. And then I'll never see them again. And that's what I want for myself right now.
Yeah.
Please don't judge yourself if what you want right now is not how you used to see yourself.
Yeah. And you know what? I also think there have to be degrees of readiness because based on the experience of loss, meaning what if you were married or with someone who had a long-term illness and it was like a long, slow death, and then that person did finally pass away? It's almost as though you've been getting yourself ready in some respects, like you had more time to really contemplate this versus someone who loses someone from a heart attack, like you're on a vacation and you're still in a state of shock. I can't imagine that those two experiences are going to be the same. And as you pointed out, everybody's experience is different anyway.
That's right. And even when we think we're getting ready because there's been a long illness, there's still the shock of, this is it.
Yeah.
I can't hold this person's hand ever again, which at least I could do that while they were ill.
Yeah. You know, I mean, again, we're not, in my case, not talking about a partner. I'm happily married now for 31 years, but I am talking about my mother. I mean, she had a long illness and I knew it was inevitable. I knew it was, but it wasn't like so imminent. It was still such a shock when she passed away. Such a shock. We're never ready for someone's passing.
Ready. We're never ready.
To that point. No, never. Never. Wow. I'm curious. So you wrote the book and I know it was mulling around in your head in 2016, 17, 18 and the like, and then it came out in 2019. And as you pointed out before, there really wasn't a book focusing on this at that time that you were aware of. So how do you think it's evolved? Has it evolved? I mean, do you see more books about it? Do you see more discussion about it? Because as we know, Joan, you and I can say, we see an evolution of kind of really more conversation around aging challenges and experiences like menopause and sex after 50, 60, 70, 80, and so on and so forth. So have you seen an evolution in this particular topic as well?
The only evolution I've seen is not more books about it. There are more books about dating after grief, but there aren't specifically, this is the action plan for this chapter, that kind of self-help. There are more memoirs about it, but not really another self-help about it. Mm-hmm. But what I do find has changed is at first people saw this as a really weird topic and tiptoed about it. But in the past 5 years, I can't even count the number of interviews and presentations that I've done on this topic.
Yeah, I can imagine.
People are hungry for this topic.
Yeah.
And I'm really honored by the trust people put in me. They often write to me after they've read the book. They're not trying to get in the next book. That was a special thing. I'm not writing a third edition. I don't think I am. But anyway, not yet.
Never say never.
No, I've learned not to say never.
Uh-huh.
But people still write, this is my experience and this is how your book helped me. And I'm just so honored to be invited into the lives of people who really need someone to either sit across the table and talk to or hold their hands. And they feel that my book did that. And can I tell you about a special thing I'm doing for people who buy my book?
Yes, of course. Please do.
So if you buy the latest edition from my website, joanprice.com, directly from me.
And by the way, the link will be in the show notes, everyone. So after you listen to our conversation, just go to the show notes. Link will be there. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Joan.
Thank you. If you do that, there is a box you can check that says, please also send me a free copy of the 2019 edition to give away. And what I'm hoping you'll do is to give it to your grief counselor, to your therapist, to your hospice, to a professional who needs to know about this book to help me get the word out. So you keep the new one, give them the old one, which is still extremely helpful. I mean, it's the one that won the awards.
Yes.
And you get two for the price of one.
Yeah. I'll make sure I make that notation in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Everyone. So they will be there. Joan, really good work here. I mean, incredible work. Not only about, sex and sex toys and the fun and the pleasure part of all of this, but also you're, really spending the time on this very important topic, which, as you pointed out, nobody really has been. And and we appreciate you. And I do want to point out to everyone that we are recording a second episode, which will be next week. So everyone, make sure you tune in, where we're going to go a little more fun. And Joan is going to take us through her favorite sex toys of 2024. And I'm going to ask her, well, Joan, so which ones are you going to definitely have on your bed table or in that drawer or not even in the drawer in 2025. So we're going to have a nice, fun conversation about that. Be sure you tune in. But before we let you go, Joan, today,
yes,
I always like to do this, that 3 top takeaways from the conversation we had today. We talked about a lot, but 3 things you really want everyone to remember.
One is, whatever you're going through, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And there is help. There are people who understand you. 2 is how you come back to a new relationship, to your sexuality, is your own timeline. No one can tell you you're doing grief wrong if you want sex quickly or you want to wait years or anything in between. 3, the relationship that will serve you best right now might be very different from what has served you best in the past or will sometime in the future. So be at peace with that. Don't judge yourself if what you want is something very different.
Thank you so much, Joan. Really appreciate it.
Looking
forward to speaking with you soon about sex toys, best ones in 2024. And I know you'll be back on the show many more times after that. Thanks, Joan.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then, subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com. or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.